In a recent article in the Daily Mail, retired U.S. Army General Ben Hodges, who at one time commanded all of the U.S. forces in Europe, outlines 5 steps for Ukrainian victory over the Russians. Step 1 involves Ukraine continuing its counterattack on the Kherson region that they started in early August. Kherson is the only regional capital taken by the Russians, and it's strategically positioned along the Dnipro River that flows into the Dniprovska Gulf and the Black Sea. The Daily Mail report points out that taking Kherson removes Russia's only toehold on the west bank of the Dnipro, which in turn pretty much rules out any assault on the port of Odessa, a key gateway to the Black Sea and global markets, and further exposes the folly of Putin's sham referendums and claims to annexation. This step won't be easy and could take weeks. The most capable Russian forces, 30,000 strong, including units from the Wagner Group, the Russian-funded mercenary army, are positioned there and have mounted a strong defense since mid-August. But the Ukrainians are making incremental gains, and a victory there would be what the Daily Mail calls a watershed moment. Step 2 involves continuing the Ukrainian advance in the northeast, which started in September after Russia relocated some of its best units to the south to help defend Kherson. At this point, the Ukrainian route has recaptured 3,000 square miles in about 30 days of fighting. The Russians abandoned their positions so quickly that the Ukrainians found food heating on stoves. Dozens of vehicles and hundreds of rounds of ammunition were also seized. Russia has regrouped, though, and Ukraine's advance has slowed as it heads for the neighboring Luhansk and other cities in that region. But if those areas ultimately fall to the Ukrainians, they could mount attacks on either the regional capitals, the cities of Donetsk and Luhansk, or bypass them and push south towards the sea and the city of Mariupol. Mariupol was an important Russian conquest early in the war because it supported Putin's narrative that the invasion was to denazify Ukraine. Russia's state media said the Azov battalion defending the city was comprised of war criminals and neo-Nazis. The devastation there was total, and photos of it were seen worldwide. The Ukrainian defenders surrendered in May, so retaking it would be a morale boost for the nation as well as a strategic win. Step 3 involves splitting the battlefield in two using Ukrainian reserve forces. Remember, months ago, President Zelensky called for a total mobilization of all male citizens under the age of 65. So that, in theory, means hundreds of thousands of troops available, assuming they can be trained and armed. This reserve force would advance from Dnipro and Zaporizhia, the location of the Russian-occupied nuclear power plant that has been in the headlines in recent months, towards Mariupol and nearby Berdansk. These moves would free up the forces near Kharkiv to focus on attacking Luhansk and Donetsk, which would totally liberate the Donbass and prevent the Russians from pulling any units out of Kherson to help defend the region without first fighting through Ukrainian lines. Step 4 happens after Mariupol falls, and those forces would be half of the pincer that converges on Crimea. The other half would be the forces that advance through Kherson. Attacks on the peninsula have already started, although the Ukrainian military hasn't taken credit for them. During the build-up to the assault on Kherson, several large explosions rocked the peninsula, destroying ammo dumps, airfields, and resupply routes. But recapturing Crimea will take major military effort. As retired General Mark Hertling points out, unlike the rest of Ukraine, which is primarily flat and open, the Crimean Peninsula is largely separated from the mainland by a series of small islands with only 2 main roads that Ukrainian forces can use to attack it. General Hertling also observes that when Russia invaded Crimea in 2014, they used mostly naval infantry and special operators. Ukraine currently doesn't have much of a navy, so it's going to take some long-range artillery to start the attack there, but artillery by itself can't take ground. Also, experts estimate that Putin will put up a strong fight, stronger than elsewhere in Ukraine, and that could mean the use of strategic bombers as well as more intense employment of Russian sea power, such as it is right now. But in the face of those threats, the Ukrainians remain resolute. As President Zelensky said a few months ago, quote, "Crimea is Ukrainian, and we will never give it up." This Russian war began with Crimea and must end with the liberation of Crimea, which leads to step 5 when the last Russian forces cross the Kerch Strait Bridge, which the Ukrainians will leave standing exactly for that purpose. Once that happens, victory for Ukraine, in the current war anyway, will be complete. Of course, nothing is certain in war, and Putin will take extreme steps, from throwing conscripts to the front lines to threaten the use of nuclear weapons to preserve his regime. Also, the onset of winter is going to slow everything down for a few months. But even considering all of that, these steps seem like the likely path to ending this conflict. All right, that'll do it for this episode. If you're not already a subscriber, click the button and ring the bell so you don't miss anything. If you'd like to help support the channel, please consider using the super thanks, the heart icon below, or become a patron at patreon.com/wardcarroll. And in the meantime, I look forward to talking to you again very soon.